Hello, I'm going to go through question 17 on IMAT 2012. So for this question, we're told that 3 months ago, Jane has 5 times as many DVDs as Duncan. And since then, they've bought 12 DVDs each. And now Jane has twice as many DVDs as Duncan. And we want to know how many DVDs does Jane have now? Okay, so what should we do? Let's begin with looking at the information that they give us. So they tell us about how many DVDs Jane and Duncan have, and they give some relations between the two numbers, but we don't know what these numbers are. And it's hard to work with something when you don't know what it is, right? So let's find a way to represent the number of DVDs that Jane and Duncan have. So we can either look at the number of DVDs 3 months ago or the number of DVDs now. So I could call J the number of DVDs that Jane had 3 months ago, and D the number of DVDs that Duncan had 3 months ago, and you can manipulate these to try and figure out what these numbers are. Or similarly, we could call capital J the number of DVDs that Jane has now, and capital D the number of DVDs that Duncan has now, and work with these instead. Okay, so what relationships between the J's and the D's can we find based off the information that they give us? Okay, so let's first look at this information about 3 months ago. So we'd be working with the lowercase j and lowercase d. And we're told that the number of DVDs that Jane has is 5 times the number of DVDs that Duncan has. So what do we write in terms of j and d? Well, that's just j equals 5 times d. Next, we're told that since 3 months ago, they've both bought 12 DVDs. So the current number of DVDs that they each have is going to be 12 plus the original number of DVDs that they had. So that tells us that capital J is little j plus 12 and capital D is little d plus 12. And lastly, we know that now Jane has twice as many DVDs as Duncan. So capital J, the number of DVDs that Jane has now, is going to be twice capital D, the number of DVDs that Duncan has now. And now we have these relations between J and D, but there's quite a lot of letters and it's making everything a bit complicated. So it'd be nice to have everything in terms of one set of J and D. So you could settle for just using the lowercase j and d or just using the capitals. But because we want to know how many DVDs Jane has now, and that's just capital J, I'm going to write everything in terms of capital J and D. So that would mean writing this equation in terms of capital J and D. And how can we do that? Well, fairly easily by substituting in using these two equations, right? So let's rearrange these for small j and small d. So that will give us j minus 12 equals little j and d minus 12 equals little d. And substitute these two into this equation. That would just give us j minus 12 equals 5 times d minus 12. And if we simplify this, so here I've expanded this bracket out, gives us these two terms, and I've added this 12 onto both sides. So now we have minus 5 times 12 plus 12, so that's just minus 4 times 12. So this becomes j equals 5d minus 48. So now we've got basically two simultaneous equations for j and d. And that's a standard enough thing we can do that. So these are our equations, and remember we're looking for the number of DVDs Jane has now, so capital J. So we might as well just substitute out the D's. So if I use this first equation to work out what D is in terms of J and then substitute into here, so this gives us that D is going to be equal to a half J, and then substituting that into here, we get J equals 5 times a half J minus 48. And if we bring all the j's onto one side, so here I've added this 48 onto both sides and I've taken off this j. So we've got 48 equals 5 over 2j minus j. And 5 over 2j minus j is just 3 over 2j. And if I divide through by the 3 over 2, I get j equals 2/3 times 48, which is equal to 32. So our answer is 32, which is option B.